everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Roker Report podcast in association with the Sunderland Community Soup Kitchen. It's Gav, and, well, I've got to be honest with you, we did record a match preview, and then so much has happened that we've had to kibosh it and start again, because as I sit here at 12:30 at night, I hope you all appreciate this, 12:30 at night, to record a new podcast, more has gone on, and we felt that we had to get back together, me and Martin, and start all over again, because as I think you'll have no doubt heard, people, looks like Jack Clarke's leaving the club, as well as a bunch of other stuff going on in terms of income. And so yeah, whilst it was nice talking about the potential of going into the Burnley game and then being disrupted, Martin, I think it's possibly the case that we are also going to be disrupted going into this game. And well, there's a lot to talk about, mate, isn't there? How are we doing?
I'm alright, yes, no, there certainly is a lot to talk about, and yeah, there's a lot to kind of pull the pieces out, because it seemed to come a little bit out of the blue. I think it's something that we've kind of all had at the back of our minds that might happen this summer, but as the summer goes on, you kind of hope that it'll just all fade away and we'll sort of go into September with a full squad intact, but that doesn't look like it's going to be the case. But I tell you what, that was a brilliant podcast you and me did the other day, mind. You know, it was probably one of the best we've ever done.
And they'll never know. They'll never know.
Nobody.
I tell you what, we were so upbeat. Even while I was thinking about whether we should actually do this tonight, I was thinking, well, could we just sort of record new stuff to put around the preview we did? But it wouldn't have sounded the same, because we were like a couple of days off the back of the win that we had at the weekend, and we were buzzing, and we were thinking, I was talking about, you know, all these really positive things that were going on, and a lot of them still remain, but you can't ignore this Jack Clarke situation. I mean, it's bound to have a knock-on effect going into the weekend. Obviously, as we record this, it's the early hours of Friday morning. The manager did a press conference yesterday and was asked about it and was a little bit coy, but to be honest, reading around what he said and working it out, you could kind of get the impression that he knew that Clarke was going, and the noise around this Ipswich attempt to sign him wasn't going away as the day developed, and then it finally came really late on Thursday night, the news that we'd accepted a bid of around, I mean, I've seen varying reports, but it looks like it's around 15 million rising to 20. I've seen others which have claimed it's 20 rising with add-ons. I think, you know, the truth might be somewhere in the middle. We'll probably not get to know the true length and breadth of the deal and how much we've received, but it's fair to say it hasn't gone down well, has it? People think, and me included, I think, you know, if we were going to sell Jack Clarke, I was fine with that, providing we got a fee which seems suitable. And when you see the market and you see what a lot of other players have gone for this summer, it does feel like a little bit of a kick in the teeth when you see what's being reported. Like I say, I don't know if it's true, but if it is true, then it feels a little bit deflating, I've got to say.
I think when you look at it on paper, and obviously we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, we don't know what promises have been made and all that sort of stuff in the past to Clarke, do we? But when you look at the context of the fees that have been paid for fairly average players over the course of this summer, 15 million plus 5, and, you know, bearing in mind that we have a percentage to pay back to Spurs for a sell-on fee, don't we? So, you know, if we get 15 million up front, what's that, 3.5, it'll go to Spurs straight off. Spurs, if that's a 25% sell-on clause. To me, it seems cheap as chips to sell them for. There's a number of aspects to this, right? So there's the fee that we've got for him, or look like we're getting for him. There's the destination that he's going to. And then it's the actual sale of him. Now, I've actually got no problem on a fundamental basis with the sale of him, because that's the model, right? That's the whole thing that they've been doing, and they've made no bones about it, that we're going to be buying players young, develop them, and sell them on and reinvest the money. So, like, I've got no problem with that concept, because I think if you buy into the signing of young players and the development of them, you've also got to buy in to the other side of it, right? So I've got no issue with us selling players. I think that the timing of it isn't great. I think, you know, if we'd sold them earlier on in the summer, then it's a little bit more comfortable, because you've got time to reinvest that money and get that, you know, that team together. You know, the fact that we've had such a good start to the season and he's played such a good, important role in that, again, that it's kind of disappointing now, because we were looking the other day going into the Burnley game with us having to settle a team, Burnley in all sorts of turmoil because they're selling players left, right, and centre, and we've lost our sort of star player. So it looks as if we have at the time of recording. So there's a number of bits to it, but I think the headline is the fee. And I think it's a really, really poor fee on the surface of it. And look, as I said, we don't know what promises have been made. We know those bids came in January that were turned down. Now, the club might well have said to Jack Clarke in January, look, if we stick with us now to the end of the season, during the summer, if we get a bid that matches 20 million in total, you can go and talk to them. And, I think as a club, if that, again, it's complete speculation, isn't it? But if we've made that sort of promise to a player, we need to keep it. So we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. We only know what's out there. We don't actually know if what out there in terms of the fee is correct. As you say, we probably never know. But, the fee is Ipswich are getting an absolute steal if they're getting him for 15 million, because if the 5 million is based on them staying up, then we'll get 15 million, because that's kind of it, isn't it?
Yeah, and you mentioned it's the destination too. I'm with you. I think I've got no problem really with them going. I long ago I accepted that this would be something which happens on a regular basis, at least once a transfer window, certainly in a summer, that we will sell a player. Because if you look what well-run clubs do, not just in England but abroad, it's just what happens. Whether it's a team going for the top half of the Premier League, they might sign a player for 20, 30 million, but then sell them for 70 or 80. This is just something which happens. I accepted that ages ago. I've got no problem with us signing players. People who listen to the podcast will have heard my reaction when we sold Ross Stewart. It was something I was on board with because I kind of accepted that's just something that happens, He didn't grow up as a little boy dreaming to play for Sunderland like Dan Neil, like Chris Rigg, perhaps, like, Elliot Embleton and like Anthony Patterson coming through the academy. They all probably dreamt to play for the first team. Jack Clarke never did, but we kind of met at the right time. He'd had a bad move to Tottenham. He'd had a bunch of loans which never worked out. He came to Sunderland. To be honest, his loan spell, he wasn't great, but we saw enough potential there to sign him on a permanent basis. And he found a home here. And I'm sure, he's really grateful for everything which Sunderland have given him. And likewise, we're really grateful for everything he's given us. But we aren't the be-all and end-all for Jack Clarke. And
no, it's not. Do you not think it's such a risky move for him? I think it's a really shit transfer for him. And I think he needs a new agent.
It depends. It depends, to be honest, because we don't know how many other Premier League teams are in for him. If this is the only serious offer on the table, then maybe he's looked at it and went, "Look, I can triple my wages and I'll be playing in the Premier League next week."
Oh, but like for him, right? And again, I'm kind of looking at it with a bit of a red and white glasses on here, right? But for him, if his options are staying here until January and going to Ipswich, who, I don't see a way in the world that they're not going to struggle massively and get relegated this season from the Premier League. He's not going to get a kick. He's going to be out. He's not going to get the ball as much. He's going to be defending an awful lot. Yeah. I think it's an absolutely terrible move for him from a footballing point of view. Money-wise, it might make sense.
Don't get us wrong. I completely agree. I think, and I've wrote a piece which will be up on the site by the time this goes out. It's the one thing I can't get out of my head, like Ipswich. I always saw Jack Clarke going to a Wolves, a Brentford,
Aston Villa, Crystal Palace, something like that. That sort of.
I genuinely think he could go to a club like that, and he would suit that kind of team. I didn't see him going to a team who's just been promoted. I'll be honest. That's what I'm disappointed with. I get why people are kind of hung up on the fee, and I think there's aspects to the deal which we're going to question. I'm not particularly bothered that he's leaving. It's where he's going, And like I said before, he didn't grow up as a Sunderland fan, so I'm not expecting him to stay here forever. But Ipswich, and I mean no disrespect to Ipswich, because they're a really well-run club. They've done brilliant to get to the Premier League. They've got a brilliant head coach. But I agree with you. They're not going to be in the Premier League next year. I'd be very, very shocked.
If you look at again, without disrespecting Ipswich at all, because, they've got a good history and they're a good club. But, again, I'm biased, but they're nowhere near the size of club that we are. They're going to get relegated unless something seismic happens and, they eventually stay up, but I just don't see it. I think the squad that they've got, they came up, as we know, from League One, straight up from the Championship, they've got a squad that, you know, a lot of those players played in League One for them. And I just don't see that being a good move for him at all. I think it's a good move for Ian Hart, who will get his cut from wherever he gets, but I just think it's a terrible move for him.
We were well rid of him, by the way, until someone pointed out that he's Tommy Watson's agent as well.
So, which might have something to do with it all, you know. He's trying to manoeuvre Watson into the first team as well.
Yeah, possibly.
You know, there's that aspect to it. Because I think, you know, and that's the other side of the coin, right? So you've got, obviously, Clarke there, who I know he had, 4 or 5 weeks out injured last season, but, you know, he's a durable football player. He doesn't pick up too many injuries. He's consistent. He's fit. So the likes of Watson, the likes of Mundell, the other players who can play out there, you know, they aren't getting a chance. They haven't had a chance ever. So we actually don't, when you talk about replacements, we actually don't know whether we need to sign one or whether we actually have one. I actually fancy Watson more than I fancy Mundell to go into that position eventually. But it's going to be an interesting thing to see how it all pans out, because, you know, we've got some incomings to talk about, which you kind of, you know, you look at the timing of things and how things are falling, you kind of suspect that these incomings rely on Clarke going out to release the funds to get those players in. So I think we're going to have to, we can't really judge this until we see how it all falls.
Yeah.
You know, because it could be a case, right, that the club have agreed fees that they're actually really happy with, that they think are really low for 2 or 3 players coming in. So they can afford to take £3 or £4 million less for Clarke because they've agreed fees over here that are £9 or £10 million less than they thought that they might have to pay. So again, we don't know the full picture. So we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. We don't know what other things are in the works. And this deal isn't something that's happening in isolation. Jack Clarke hasn't been perfectly happy, and then an offer's come in and it's been accepted. There's so many other things going on around it that influence and dictate whether the club have accepted it. And look, to be fair to the club, as we've seen since Speakman and Louis Dreyfus have been in there, they've got good fees for players. We haven't overspent. We've got good deals both in and out. So this isn't going to be a case where they go, fuck it, we'll accept that. That's fine. We're bored of this now. Like, there's so much other stuff going on. And, you know, being completely objective about it, they think that this is a good deal to accept right now. So, you know, they know the full picture, we don't. So we can only kind of take that at face value. And we can argue about the fee, we can argue about the destination, we can argue about whether we should keep him. But, you know, behind the scenes, they know an awful lot more than we do. They've got the full picture. And, you know, I think, you know, obviously Christian Speakman and KLD kind of split opinion. But for my money, from where they've come in to where we are now, they've earned trust because we've progressed as a club. So I think it's one of those we've got to get, you know, not get too hung up about, because the only outcome of getting really hung up about it is going to be detrimental to what happens on the field on Saturday in the following weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned, you know, we could already have the replacement in the door. We could. I've never seen Romain Mundell given a run in that position. I mean, you know, he could end up being Watson. Or Watson, exactly. Yeah, we've got two players in that position who are waiting for a chance, and I suppose if you're taking the model on a whole, that's kind of the thing, isn't it? You lose a player, but you already have the replacement through the door. But then you mentioned before potentially bringing in replacements as well, and there's been a few names. I imagine if it's not Friday, at some point over the weekend, the club will announce the signing of Wilson Isidor. I think it's said that way. Who is apparently a centre forward, but looks like he played most of his football when he had that really good spell for Lokomotiv Moscow playing off the left. I mean, it could be no coincidence that he plays that position, but that would kind of tell me we're signing somebody else who can play there as well, who can also play up front.
Yeah, no, that's right.
From what we've heard, he trained on Friday with the first team, did all his media, the deal was all agreed, he had his medical the day before, so if he's not already in the door by the time this goes out, he certainly will be at some point over the weekend. He's a 23-year-old French forward playing for Zenit St. Petersburg. He was on loan there last season, and then it looks like that had to be turned into a permanent due to some clause in the loan deal, but Zenit are happy to let him leave. He's known by Regis Lebris. He worked with him at Rennes, so he's known to him already. He knows what he's going to get with him. There's already that prior relationship, which is good. It remains to be seen whether he'll be a good signing. On paper, it looks like a good signing to me. Certainly didn't see it coming. That's another... We seem to do a lot of our business in the shadows, and people don't realise that there's stuff actually going on. And you talk about the full picture there when it comes to Clarke and what else is going on. This all slots into that. Nobody saw this coming. It came out absolutely nowhere. You know what I mean? So in that sense, I imagine we have got plenty going on. There's also been rumours that Roko Simic, who is a Croatian striker playing for RB Salzburg, looks like he's coming in as well. I don't know whether, that's as concrete as the other one, but it was certainly indicated that that's likely. He's a 6'3" striker playing for RB Salzburg, as I said. He's had a bunch of loan spells, already played sort of 150 games, got something like 30 or 40 goals. I'm not too sure. He might even have more than that. But, for a young player, got a decent record, very different to what we've already got. So we've got irons in the fire. I'm sure there are other players as well. And you're right what you said before. It's likely that the fees for these players are set in stone, yes, but possibly dependent on the sale of Clarke. There's lots going to go on this week in terms of incomes and outgoings. Me and you actually on the pod that will never see the light of day talk a lot about this and potential players going out the door and stuff, and things have changed even since then. At least it looks like we've got players coming in, which would have been at this stage in the window when you're selling a player as important as Jack Clarke, you've got to have things lined up. You can't leave yourself short.
No, that's exactly right.
And it looks like we have. Whether Isidor in particular is going to fully replace Jack Clarke, no idea. I couldn't tell you a thing about him. All I've done is read about and seen video like everybody else. The Russian Premier League, I would imagine, isn't far off the standard of the Championship. So if he scored goals there, then that's certainly a decent sign. But it's all a bit strange because these are players we're not familiar with, right? We're very familiar with Jack Clarke. Right. I haven't got a clue about this guy, so whether he's going to be good or not, I haven't got the foggiest. I guess I'm just going to have to sit back and try and enjoy the ride.
I think it's an interesting one with him, isn't it? Because he played youth football in France at an international level. I think looking at it, he was sort of playing in the French third tier mostly when he played in France before he went over to Russia. But he's got record over in Russia, so it'll be an interesting one. He looks, on the obligatory YouTube compilation, he looks like a decent player, doesn't he? And
every video I've seen, he's cutting in off the left hand side with his right foot and shooting. Yeah. So, which is kind of Jack Clarke's trait, isn't it?
It is. So we'll see. I think the other thing as well. We don't know much about this Isidor. We don't know that much about this Simic. And, the reality is that, again, first team level, we don't know much about Tommy Watson or Romain Mundle. So we've got all these options to have a look at. It's a shame that when Clarke was out last season, Watson was also injured at the same time, wasn't it? Because we might have a better idea of whether he can step up. Because, if he'd come in for the 5 or 6 games Clarke was out last season and looked ready, then you're kind of far more confident at this point because you go, well, we've got somebody there to come in. So it's going to be interesting to see how we actually do that. I think Simic is an exciting one for me because he looks almost like a Ross Stewart clone when you look at the videos of him. He's quite a mobile, tall striker who's got a good record, and he's been linked with a lot of big clubs over the past 12, 18 months. So he's going to be one that could be good. I think, and it's going to be interesting as well with him and Mendy, isn't it? Because Mendy seems to be, almost doing a Pete Odom-Wingy. He's going to turn him outside the stadium in a shirt, I think, before we actually sign him.
Well, the quote he gave on Thursday, I mean, I'll feel very sorry for the guy if he doesn't sign for us. But he kind of does feel like we're moving away from him, doesn't it? It might change, but I'll quickly read out a little bit of it. This was given to Foot Mercato, who are a French outlet, and these quotes are direct from Alexander Mendy. It's clear to me and to everyone else that I want to go to Sunderland, and the new management must respect the commitments the institution has made to me. If I'm training today, it's to be ready to start this new challenge with Sunderland. I'll skip the end. He has said, Kien and the fans will always be in my heart, but my head is at Sunderland.
He'll be buying a season ticket there.
Well, he may have to if he doesn't get a move. But I mean, again, there's plenty going on, isn't there?
Oh, there is. And you kind of wonder whether this Simic stuff is actually just to force the hand there. There's that potential as well, isn't there?
Do you not think when you see you're recruiting for 2 strikers or 2 forwards, it would be daft to not have several options lined up? Because if one doesn't come off, then you move to the other, right?
But it's a conversation that we had the other day as well, isn't it? That, in terms of recruitment, what we need, I still reckon we need 2 strikers, right? And that's without Clarke going. So if Clarke goes, then you go, well, we actually need 3 forwards, and we've got 3 names there, haven't we? So the chances are I actually think all 3 will come along because, while Simic has played and got a good record, is he ready to play 46 games in a championship season? Who knows? We've made that mistake before with young players who we've brought in and expect them to come in and hit the ground running.
Yeah, scored in the Champions League, which kind of shows he's got some pedigree.
No, he hasn't. No, he absolutely does. And I think he's a different level to other young players that we've, certainly on paper anyway, he's a different level to some of the other young players that we've brought in the past. But, again, it's a big move for all of them. Coming from overseas, coming to England, coming to the North East, settling into a new club. It's a big thing for them. So, as we've seen with most of the players who we've brought in from overseas, it does take them a while to settle down. So, look, we've got that. Whether the Clarke thing affects Bennett's loan, I don't think that's been confirmed yet, has it? But Bennett's going to Reading, apparently, isn't he? On loan for a season. I don't think that would affect that, but, he's somebody who is a left winger by trade, a different sort of left winger to Clarke, but I think he would benefit from a season in League One getting kicked to shit, really, rather than spending time on the bench here. But I think, the overriding thing that we need to think about and hope is that this is the only sale, because we've got a week until the deadline. I think if we get to the transfer window shutting and we brought in those 3 players that we've talked about, and Clarke's the only one to depart, I'm going to be all right with that. I think, we'll probably set up pretty well for the season. If we go into this week and we're fielding bids for Dan Neil, Trey Hume, other players who have a value, Patterson, people like that.
I imagine we will, by the way. I think as teams get more and more desperate, we will.
And the worry is, does the fact that we've accepted 15 million for Clarke open the door for more bids? People will be going, they've accepted 15 million for Clarke, they'll accept 6 for Patterson, they'll accept 7 for Neil. Now, it doesn't necessarily work like that, does it? The Clarke deal is in isolation, but as a club, we don't want to give the message out to the wider sort of footballing world that we're going to sell players on the cheap, because that's what it looks like on face value. It looks as if we're selling Clarke on the cheap. So it's, but then again, people are only, it's the same in anything in life, right? Things are only worth what people are prepared to pay for them. So if nobody's prepared to pay 25, 30 million for Clarke and he wants to leave, which, I think to be fair to him, he's gone about things the right way. He's performed on the pitch. He hasn't kicked up a fuss. He hasn't said anything publicly. But I think it's quite clear he wants to go on to the next level. He wants to go back to the Premier League. So, we can, if that's the case, and we've made assurances to him that we'll accept bids that meet a certain value or whatever, then we can only accept what people are prepared to pay, because, you don't want a situation, we had it with Lamine Kone, right? We turned down a massive bid from Everton for him, made him stay, he phoned it in for the rest of the season, we had to bloody pay him off. So, there's the flip side to actually keeping players as well, isn't there? If a player wants to leave, then, no amount of convincing is going to get them to be truly happy and stay and produce the best football. So I think you kind of got to be pragmatic about it in that sense and go, okay, the chance, if Clarke wanted to stay, he'd turn Ipswich down.
Yeah, it's as simple as that.
The reality of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is. It's as simple as that. And, nobody's forcing him to go to Ipswich. It's not a case of we're going to him, look, we need you to accept this deal because the club's going to fold otherwise. It's not that sort of situation. It's his decision whether he goes or stays. And if he goes, it's because he wants to go. So I think you've got to be again, very pragmatic about that. And there's absolutely no point in trying to convince somebody who doesn't want to be here to stay, because, it does not work.
Yeah, and I imagine those conversations have happened repeatedly over the last 18 months where the club have tried to make him stay. But we aren't going to be able to match Premier League wages. I mean, we couldn't even compete with Ipswich in January when they signed Kiefer Moore.
No, that's right.
That deal was 30 grand a week to cover his wages from Bournemouth. Ipswich paid it, we didn't. So we aren't going to be paying Premier League wages for players, not now. And whether that's the right thing right now, it is completely up for debate. There will be people who will say, well, we should just have broke the wage structure, given Jack Clarke whatever he wanted to be paid, and kept him. And we don't know the finer details of that. We don't know whether it was ridiculous amount of money or what. Again, we're just speculating here. But your point at the core there is right. If he truly wanted to stay, he would turn down Ipswich and he would stay at Sunderland. So, there's got to be some appetite from his side to leave. And I do get it to a degree. I don't understand why he wants to go to Ipswich of all places, but I understand why he might want to play in the Premier League and triple his wages. I get that. But we've just got to move on, really.
Yeah.
It looks like he's going. We've just got to crack on. We've got a game on Saturday and it's a tough game and we've got to try and focus on that as a club. It was already going to be a tough game. It's going to be even tougher now if he's not playing. I did want to talk more about this, but it's just kind of a sideshow now, really, isn't it, to everything else that's going on? It's I've said before, not this season, but certainly in the past, the transfer window really does impact how the season starts for everybody. I wish it would shut before the season starts because
it's ridiculous. It should do it. It's ridiculous. I don't really understand why it does sort of run the first month of the season because it doesn't help anybody.
No.
It really doesn't help the players. It doesn't help clubs. It doesn't help fans. Look, I think it's really important, isn't it, that we do put it to one side as quickly as it's done. If it's done and dusted, it's done. Nobody can do anything about it. You've got to move forward. You've got to look ahead, and you just got to put it to one side. And we've got to focus on the game because Labrie doesn't deserve to get any negativity from the crowd. The team, the players don't deserve any negativity or disillusionment, rather. We've got to kind of harness that positivity that we got from the first two games of the season and go, fuck it, if Jack Clarke's not here, fuck it, we're still a bloody good team with fantastically good players. And I think, if you look at the first two games of the season, Cardiff and Sheffield Wednesday, Clarke's played well. Like, he got the goal against Cardiff, he played well against Sheffield Wednesday, but it wasn't a case of everything going down the left wing and us giving the ball to Clarke and that was it. That was our tactic.
Mm-hmm.
Which it was when he had that spell out last season, we suffered badly because we were just playing through Clarke.
Yeah.
That's all we were doing in that spell under Beale. We were playing through Clarke. Roberts has come back in form. We've got options out on the left. We've got Chris Riggs' performance on Saturday was brilliant. We've got Brown to come back into the team. My end is looking good. We've got some new players to come in. There's so much, and the team's actually set up to play in a really attractive way that's intelligent. It looks as if we've got some intelligence about how we're actually setting up the formation, the system that we're using, what we do and when. It's really well drilled. And it's not a case of, and with the greatest respect to Tony Mowbray, who I thought, we both thought did a great job when he was here, but his tactics were give it to Roberts, give it to Clarke and let them play. Now, that isn't the case now. We've got a different setup.
Yeah.
And, hopefully it's a case of whoever comes in to replace Clarke on that left-hand side, they slot into the same system and do a similar job. They're not going to do the same job as Clarke, because Clarke's quite a different footballer, isn't he? He's got that flair, that it's pretty individual how he plays, and he's got a great goal scoring records for a player who plays out wide. So we're going to have to replace his goals, which is why I think we're looking at more central strikers. The Simic link has emerged after Clarke's transfer has come about. So I think we're going to try to replace. We need to replace his goals, but not necessarily replace them from the position that he was playing. So I think there's a lot of pieces that need to fall into place until we can actually see what's what. But I think as a club, look, if he's gone, he's gone. So there's absolutely no change in that. What we can do is give the club the best chance of success this season, and as we will do, get behind everybody who's playing on Saturday, and not turn it into that one thing goes wrong and everyone's on Speakman's back shouting Speakman out, because it's not productive.
No.
And as I said, I think both Speakman and Kirill Dreyfus, as far as I'm concerned, have earned trust, and we've got to trust them that this is the right deal at the right time for whatever reason, and we've got to crack on.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting week or so, isn't it? Like, obviously the game is massive and we've had a brilliant start. If we got something from that, it would be an even better start.
Yeah.
Like I said, I was really confident before all this Clarke stuff happened. I'm sure we'll still be well prepared. It's obviously going to affect us. It's got to. But Burnley have had a lot of upheaval this week. I mean, imagine not only losing Jack Clarke, but losing one of your centre halves and one of your midfield players, and like a lot of their best players have gone this week. And there's still a bunch of them who haven't left yet, but probably won't be at the club next week. So you think we've got upheaval going on. That's even. And to be fair to them, they've dealt with it really well so far.
Yeah.
They've got 2 brilliant results in the league. They've managed to. They have used players who've left already and stuff, but they, even last weekend, I think some of the big names stayed out of the team, and the manager was able to get them focused. And you've got to hope that's what our manager does. I think it'll be a good game. I actually don't think this Clarke thing will affect us as much as people might be anticipating. You mentioned something there about maybe just grabbing someone and slotting them in and them knowing their job. If it's Mundell, I'm fairly confident he could do okay there. I'm a lot higher on him than a lot of people are. Look, I know he's not Jack Clarke, but he hasn't had a run of games, and that's his position. He hasn't had a run in the first team, and I mean, majority of the time you say Romain Mundell, he's playing with other fringe players. He's not playing with first teamers, and he'll be relishing the opportunity now. If Jack Clarke's going and he's not going to be there on Saturday, then he'll be absolutely desperate to impress people. And I think he's got a lot of the raw materials there, and he might not be the long-term solution, but I'm more than happy for him to come in for that game. I think he'd be fine. So,
Well, I think the hope would be from the club that he is the long-term solution. I suspect that's why he was signed. And I think, I know I've banged on about before, but that team selection that we made against Preston, right? If we'd made 3 or 4 changes and one of them was Mundell playing with the majority of the rest of the sort of first 11, and he'd had a storming game, again, you'd be kind of going, it's all right, we've got a replacement there. But because we chucked in everybody together in a sort of second string, it makes it more difficult for people, doesn't it? But look, Burnley have sold a number of players. He's saying, it just goes to show that any championship club has to sell players if offers come in, they're deemed good enough. Players are naturally going to want to play at the top level. And the irony is that if we'd accepted Burnley's bid for Clarke last summer, Clarke would be one of the players leaving Burnley now, going somewhere else, wouldn't he? So it's it's just a fact of life in the championship that if you're not in the Premier League, the other clubs are going to come and pick your best players, because the wages they can offer, the players are going to want to leave unless they've got a real affinity to the club. So it's just a fact of life, unfortunately. You can argue about whether it's right or wrong, or whether the money in the Premier League's too much, and the divide it's creating between the Premier League and the Championship, and how sustainable it is, and all that sort of stuff. But the reality is, if a Premier League club wants a Championship player, they'll get him.
Yeah, well, let's see what happens between now and the next time we record, because loads seems to be kicking off.
Between now and then, when this one goes out.
Yeah,
Triple signing announced at 7 o'clock on Friday morning.
We've reached that point in the transfer window though where it's just constant. There's constant stuff. So yeah, let's see how it goes. Hopefully Sunderland do get something from that Burnley game. I'm sure we will. I feel really confident even though this has happened. But let's see. Hopefully it's a good weekend for us. Hopefully we get some new faces through the door. And Jack Clarke unfortunately goes, but he goes without our best wishes, and we just move on. We've got to move on. I think everybody is, no matter what your opinion is on this sale, or whether he should go, or whether the fee's right or wrong, or whatever, life goes on. Sunderland will still be there next week. We're bigger than any player, and I made peace with that many years ago. I'm not.
No,
I don't get hung up on players leaving. I'd be more gutted if, honestly, Luke O'Nine's my favourite player. He's not the best player we've got, but if I lost him, I'd be gutted because he's my favourite player. I love everything. But other players, you just get on with it. I got over Ross Stewart leaving very quickly. I don't know how I got over Isaac Lee Hadji leaving, but that's another story. But no, it's just something that happens, and we'll be fine. We'll be absolutely fine. I know I'm generally quite positive, but surely fans can see this is just part of the process, and we have to just crack on.
Well, it is. I think the other side of it. The other side of it is that if we were serious about getting promotion, we've got a better chance of doing that with Jack Clarke on the side.
Yeah.
Now that's the other side of it, isn't it? And that's it's a simplistic way of looking at it, and it's not something you can control. If he wants to leave, then that's that. What you have to hope is that, after we sold Ross Stewart, the next game that we played obviously was against Southampton, which was the club he joined, but they just come down from the Premier League. Big game at Stadium Light, and it really galvanised everybody.
Yeah.
And we turned in the best performance that we played last season. So I'm hoping that this does the same. Gives you a couple of days to get make peace with it, the fact that he's gone. A couple of days to look forward. A couple of new signings in, hopefully. And come Saturday, everyone's galvanised because we're thinking, with the best will in the world, and I love Jack Clarke, and if Luke O'Nine's your favourite player, Jack Clarke's been my favourite player for the last couple of years. But you kind of go, fuck him. If he doesn't want to be here, you've done really well, shake your hand, kind of wish you all the best, but not that best. Don't want you to single-handedly keep Ipswich up. But, hope he does all right. But we've got to use that to galvanise us. We've got to use his momentum to kick on. And hopefully in a year's time, he's looking and going, shit, that was a stupid decision. Because we've gone up and they've gone down. So we'll kind of see how it all pans out. But hopefully with the right reinvestment of the money, and I think that's the biggest thing, right? And I think it's looking likely, but the criticism of the Stewart sale was that we haven't seen that money reinvested to any great extent, unless you call Leo Hielder a good reinvestment of the Ross Stewart money. So, if we see this money reinvested and it's evidently on 3 players or 2 players who come into the first team and improve it, then you go, that completely makes sense. Yeah. Because while we would like to have kept Clarke, the collective improvement over here, as a result of that, has been better. We've improved the side. And ultimately, that's what we want. Ultimately, we want to see a side that's playing good football, is successful with players who want to be here. And I don't actually care about the personnel. I care about the collective.
Yeah.
I care about what the team does. So, while we all have really enjoyed watching Jack Clarke, and I think, he's been pivotal, hasn't he, in the last couple of seasons in getting us established back in the Championship. But if that's over, it's over. And as Roy Keane would say, we move on.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself, mate. Well, thank you very much. Let's hope we've got 3 points to talk about when we get back together at the weekend. Make sure you catch up with everything on rokerreport.sbnation.com. There's plenty going on. I'm sure we'll react to every bit of news and movement going on over the next week or so. So make sure you catch up with that. And cheers, Martin. Thank you very much, mate.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers to listeners. We will be back after Burnley. We'll catch you then.